Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. Today, I'm excited to speak with Dr. Robert Wolfe. Dr. Wolfe is the author of the historical narrative, Not a Real Enemy, a Nautilus Book Award winner. Not a Real Enemy is a true to life account of his father's experiences before, during, and after the Nazi occupation of Hungary. I'm exactly halfway through this amazing account, and I think the word I would use is chilling. All I can say is that whatever innocence the world may have had was clearly lost during the Holocaust. I always enjoy speaking to authors, particularly physician authors, and I can't wait to learn how this book came to life. But before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, locumstory.com. Maybe you're curious about locums and how it might fit into your career story. But do you know all the different reasons physicians choose locums and how it works for them? At locumstory.com, you can hear firsthand stories as diverse as physicians themselves. There's not one solution for everyone. The variety of opportunities might surprise you. Locum Story is an unbiased educational resource. It has tools that let you explore trends in your specialty and compare different locums agencies. There's even a simple quiz to see if locums is right for you. Do your own research at locumstory.com. It's easy. And now to my guest. Welcome, Dr. Robert Wolfe.
Hi, Dr. Wilner. How are you? Thank you for having me. I much appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy that you're here. Your book, I was just saying, is I'm halfway through, and it's fascinating and chilling. So we're going to get to that. But first, let's a little bit of background. Who are you, and what do you do every day, and how did you come to write this book?
Well, that could take a whole hour answering all of that, but I'm Rob Wolfe. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I was born in Detroit and raised in suburban Michigan. My dad was an OBGYN in suburbia. He ended up delivering 10,000 babies in his career, shortened career, about a 24-year career. That's sort of the punchline after everything he went through. So I went to Tufts University undergrad. I was very fortunate to go to Tufts, and then University of Michigan Medical School. I got in an early decision. My dad actually took me to that interview. I'll never forget that day, a Saturday, and I got in September. I was so pleased. By far my number one choice, being from the state of Michigan and a top 10 medical school. So lucky me again. Internship at Boston University's Framingham Union Hospital, now called Metro West, famous for the Framingham Heart Studies. And then I did my radiology training, diagnostic radiology at Brown, Rhode Island Hospital. And then my neuroradiology fellowship at Yale New Haven Hospital. So that sounds like not much, but that's a lot of sweat in those 30 years of pretty much indentured servantry, as I call it. And finally, I'm about 30 years now and finally ready to go out and get a job. And that's what I've been doing, is practicing radiology for about 35 years now. I've been part-time since I've been 43 and I'm now 61. So I've been happy to be able to do that and have choices in life. I'm very active in sports. I've been a gym rat for 40 years. I'm a foodie. I love music. I love sports. I've been to hundreds of concerts and ball games, and I'm very interested in a lot of things. Lately, I've been more interested in history. The book brought me to that. I have liked history before I started working on the book, but so about the book, my mom and dad were from Hungary. They were not from the United States. They were immigrants from Hungary. They came over in 1956 after the Hungarian Revolution. That was my dad's fourth escape. My dad had 4 escapes in his lifetime, and he even missed one. There's a little spoiler. He went to the wrong train under communist Hungary, and everybody who made that train, including his medical school classmate, got arrested. So the luck on this guy. I prefer to think of it as the hand of God, but my dad was very fortunate. He was also he had a lot of courage, and he had a lot of brains, and a lot of common sense. And we could talk a little bit more about that too, some of the individual stories. But in the 70s, so after they escaped Hungary and came to the United States and relearned the language, my dad had to redo his OBGYN residency in the esteemed Beth Israel in Boston. And that always makes me snicker because I don't think I could get into any Harvard program in any specialty, especially now because it's so competitive. But God bless them for doing that. And then he finished at about 1960-ish, and I hadn't been born yet, and there were no jobs in the Massachusetts area at the time of his finishing. Finally, he had learned English, and my mom was working research to support him while he did his residency. She was actually a medical student in Hungary, and 13 months before graduating, when they actually escaped in '56, and she never had the opportunity to go back. So they moved to Detroit in 1962 and had me that year, and then moved to suburbia in 1965-ish, where he was a partner in a small group. The group actually grew over time, but excellent OBGYNs and very smart guys, and a fantastic place to grow up, great people. So in the '70s, my mom and dad wrote his autobiography, and they wrote the stories of his life as though they'd happened the previous day. They were crystal clear, crisp, and as you know, you've been reading the book. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the way the dinner table was set, the way the servants, the radio, the bitter cold during his escape, just the fear of it. So they wrote it all as though it happened the previous day. They were very articulate. They were very intelligent. They were educators. They were Holocaust educators, history educators, and they were also interested in a lot of things too: the arts, opera, museums, travel, education, even sports and music, on and on. So they started with pencil and paper to typewriter to a computer. I read it as a manuscript maybe 30 years ago. Didn't think much of it. Didn't remember much of it except his very first escape, which kind of kept in my head all these years. But the second time I looked at it, 1997, my dad passed away, unfortunately. In 2016, my mom passed away, unfortunately. A historian friend of ours in my hometown handed me the disc. So the story's now on a disc. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but she said, you have to read this. You got to look at this when you get a chance. Took about a year to take care of my mom's affairs. And then I retired for a year, actually retired. And then a friend of mine out of Michigan, this is total serendipity, a former partner, asked me to help him by reading some x-rays and ultrasounds from home out of the clinic in Michigan. And so they said they were short. And so I picked it up. This is now 2018. And as a radiologist, we have two screens. The left screen is the list of the patients, and the right screen are the images. So between cases, I loaded up the disc, and the left screen was my dad's autobiography, and the right screen was my version of it converted into biography, and almost verbatim, except first person to third person. And it was kind of a dull biography. It took me about a year. It was point A to B to C. It was dad was born on, and dad did this, and dad did that. And a friend from Rhode Island actually helped me vet and query agents and publishers, and we sort of struck out with that. And so what I did was I got a couple of beta readers to read the book, and some of them were other professional authors, including one from Rhode Island. Lisa Tenner is her name, another Jewish author. And she's been great because she helped me find not only my co-author, Janice Harper, who did an excellent job with it, but also she's been a great book coach and helped me with other types of advice, like the book cover, for example, and book awards, just more than helpful, above and beyond. So a lot of it's luck, a lot of it's time and patience. And now Janice takes over and she redoes the book, parallel stories, converging stories, conversations, letters to and from home. But it's still got the fidelity of my dad's autobiography to the biography. All the stories were true, a few names made up, a little bit embellished, but the stories were all based on what actually happened to my father. So now it's 2019, 2020. Janice also helped me with the proposal package, and she helped me vet out the agents and publishers again. And we literally got Amsterdam Publishers, who's a wonderful publishing house. This is all they do is Holocaust and Holocaust related. Literally bottom of the ninth, shoestring catch, they took us on. And by the end of 2022, we had the book released, Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. That's a lot of story, isn't it? That's a lot of sweat too. That's 6 years.
Thank you for that summary. I think
a lot of sweat.
a lot of us think, of the Holocaust as something that happened a long time ago, and somebody's grandfather or something like that. But this was your father. So he must have been very young at the time of World War II, right? In the 40s. When was he born?
He was born in 1922. So he was taken to forced labor camp in 1943, late 43. So my math is correct. He was 21 years old. And my mom was actually 11 years younger than my dad. So when they had me, my dad was 40, my mom was 29. So, but they wanted to wait until they were in the free world. They didn't want to have kids under communist Hungary either. So yes, he was a very young man when he was taken away to forced labor camp, a slave labor camp. The Jewish men were not worthy of fighting for the Hungary or for the Nazis, and so they were just less worthy. They were in the paramilitary, and essentially was slave labor. And they marched all around the country. They did arduous tasks, the heat, the cold, beatings, torture, very, very miserable, starvation, a major paucity of food all the time, and just endless miles, endless walking. My dad was a very weak man when he was younger because he was kind of spoiled as a kid, as you may recall in the early parts of the book, very coddled, but he toughened up pretty well. You remember that his dad gave him beatings, and he wasn't even sure why, but maybe his dad had a little bit of a low self-esteem because being Jewish, sometimes you felt that you were less than, if that kind of makes any sense. So anyway, so he toughened up my dad. He had the integrity of his parents, which we talk about in my book talk, and determination, and just to survive and see his family again. He was an only child of his parents, and I'm an only child of only children too, by the way. So I'm kind of the last one left. And so this book is my legacy back towards my parents, my late parents, and hopefully more than just them. Hopefully the messages in the book resonate further along. But yeah, so my mom was just a kid during World War II. So, and basically she doesn't document much other than they literally ran off the line, snuck off the line when they were walking away from wherever they were supposed to go, and they end up in farm country, her and her mother and grandmother, and spent most of their part of the war under Nazi occupation. There was Nazi occupation in Hungary earlier, but it got real intense as far as deportations, as you know, in 1943 and 1944, as the Germans started to lose the war.
I think if you read the book, you get some insight in why Jews are a little touchy about anti-Semitism, because it was surprising to me how it was kind of accepted by the family. It's like, well, it'll pass, but as the governments and then as Hitler's influence grew, it just became this extraordinary force. I mean, leading to the concentration camps and things that were completely unimaginable. I mean, the story is unimaginable. And for me, as I'm reading it, that's what makes it so chilling. It's like you're reading this and it's a fiction book. You say, oh, that's silly. But it's not a fiction book. How it's like the Titanic. You know where it's going. And it's very, very troubling. So it must have been amazing for your dad to go with you to a medical school interview, which you never would have been granted. Right?
Right. Well, there's a story there. So my dad was able to go to medical school after the war. It took a while. The Jews they didn't know what to do with the Jews. My mom's uncle was a communist, and he did that it was a flip of a coin. He didn't know, he wanted to survive too. My mother's parents were divorced to save the family name, so they end up getting remarried, and those are more additional stories. The stories branch on, but we found some documentation that the communists didn't know what to do with the Jews after the war, so they basically assigned them to factories and farms. But they because of all the deaths and the killing during the war, there was a shortage of doctors in Hungary. So there was a quota of 10% of the medical schools could have Jewish people. So my dad was smart and lucky, and he got back in, and then he moved forward finally. But he had been kicked out of high school for a while for being Jewish. He was kicked off his swim team for being Jewish. And going back even pre-Nazi era, prior to the fascists, after World War I, there was Horthy, there was the Red Terror, there was the White Terror. And the Jewish people thought, no matter who's in charge here, no matter what's going on, you needed a program to keep up with it. Just like the anatomy, as we call it, the geography of the area changed so much. And that affected his parents' decision to where they lived and ultimately their fates, possibly. So they thought anybody who was in charge was going to be their enemy. They didn't feel like they had any friends, especially the government and as you know, the police. Later on, the Aerocross police, with the story of the Danube and elsewhere, the Hungarian government and police treated the Hungarian Jews worse than the Nazis did in some cases. So so you had this low self-esteem in the background constantly. But my mom and dad fought it off. They really did. I mean, with everything they went through, coming to Michigan, delivering babies, being jovial and jolly, and wanting to meet new people and new friends all over the world. They love to travel. Indian friends, Asian friends, African, and also a lot of Eastern European friends in the Michigan area, Ohio, the great Northeast in the United States, and even down here in Florida, a lot of Eastern European Jews and Eastern European Christians. And believe me, my mom and dad tried to meet every one of them. I mean, that's just how they were. So they love to get everybody's stories. They love to share their stories, and that's exactly what they did. So you would never know about my dad after all that he went through, the way he loved to go into the hospital and say hi to everybody, the nurses, the secretaries, the janitor. And I was so proud to be with them. So they were great role models for me going into medicine. And hence I was radiologist. I didn't like OBGYN that much, but I did love radiology because I like anatomy. So I'm lucky to be where I am. My parents were lucky to survive. My dad was lucky to make it. You read all these miracles that he goes through, these escapes. Four of them, as you know, I've mentioned that like every 10 minutes. Two from Nazi Hungary and two from communist Hungary. And the Nazi Hungary escapes were under forced labor camp. One in the middle of nowhere, one in Budapest, right downtown in front of Nazi headquarters. Amazing timing and luck and skill, and brains and guts. It's just. And then one is a medical student. He just had it with the communist regime and just decided to take off, and ends up arguing with an armed Russian soldier and literally makes it. But he got so nervous about fear of reprisal and his medical career that if he was caught and arrested, that he thought he wouldn't have his. So he was always conflicted until he got to the free world about practicing medicine and living under a Nazi or a communist rule. So finally, with some patience and brains, he finally got both. He got the freedom and the ability to practice medicine. So a lot of great messages that come from that. And it's so inspiring because Americans, we just don't know. We're lucky that we don't have to live like that. We don't have to be running literally without the end of we always talk about the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, where was he running to when he escaped from his first, where was he running to any of the times? You were just running into wherever there's nobody. It's just like a stray cougar or something. And starving and not having a place to live. And it had to be tough. And the lesson that we can empathize with my dad. We can put ourselves in his place, American or not. It could be a bad business deal, a bad neighbor, a natural disaster, bad local government, bad federal government or foreign government that changes our lives overnight and finds us on the run in one way or another. And I hope that never happens to us. But when you read this book, it changed me, and it's changed a lot of people, the way we think. That it's okay to wait more than 5 minutes in line at McDonald's, for example, or to sit in traffic for a little bit. It's okay to hug a loved one for an extra couple minutes while you can, because it's a nice thing to have, and don't take these things for granted, any of it.
Let me just interject that for those who watch this program, there was another episode about anti-Semitism probably a couple years ago that occurred in Montreal that is very little known, but had to do with a young resident who was excluded because he was Jewish. So even in the free world, there are these events. I will say that as I've been reading your book, I've been waking up happier every day and feeling privileged more so, and more content to wait in line and fill out forms than I usually am. Because you're right, in what seemed to be the blink of an eye, your grandparents who had a normal life and were worked hard, successful. In fact, your grandfather was a dentist, and it was a little unclear to me. Was he also a physician in those days?
Well, the lines are blurry. The lines are really blurry. There's a combination of things. I'm going to start from back to forth. My dad was an OBGYN, but during the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, a 2.5-week war where 3,000 people died, my dad had to double down as a trauma surgeon. So he actually worked 24/7 for about 2.5 weeks, while my mom ran the blood bank while she was a med student. So they were both frontliners in that regard. So going back, yes, our specialties now in the United States and Canada and elsewhere have really, really been divided up because there's so much more to learn, and there's so much specific. But yeah, I remember ophthalmology and ear, nose, and throat used to be kind of combined, and I imagine neurology and psychology, or neurology and neurosurgery. And in my case, I'm a neuroradiologist, so you and I have like if we worked in the same hospital, I would be seeing you probably 2-3 days a week with consults and going over MRIs and CTs and et cetera, et cetera. So back then, yeah, the lines were more blurred. So he may have been a physician, but dentistry is what he practiced. He was a captain on a ship during World War I on the Black Sea. It was a Red Cross ship. So, and he gave to society. My dad's father was a dentist. He was poor. It was hard. He was fortunate enough to meet a cousin that helped him finance a good practice. He gave a lot of freebies away to my dad's high school friends or friends and colleagues that didn't have the money. He did it later when my dad was in forced labor camp, in part for selfish reasons, that he could get my dad some food and some and trinkets and whatever else he could, any kind of communication he could get to my father. And he wasn't the only one. But even before the war, my dad's father would give freebies out and made a good living. And my mom was generous. They had a servant, but they were generous with the less fortunate. They gave food away and they had parties, and not necessarily ultra sociable people, but they gave to the community. They didn't deserve to get hauled off to Auschwitz, and neither does anybody, truthfully. But neither does anybody. I mean, that's the thing. The bottom line of all of this, and I got out of jury duty once just talking about this, that in the end somebody died. You know, it was a murder case, and I said, this is the book I wrote, and there's malfeasance and starvation and torture and persecution and imprisonment and incarceration and on and on and on. Why would you want me on this jury? It's whether this guy did it or not, there's still a dead man that we're talking about here. So, and we're not just talking about 6 million Jews, we're talking about 50 million people that died in World War II. So, and never mind communist Hungary, people that were malcontents, people that complained about the government, people that were out of line. So it just goes on. And the other lesson is, it's so sad that even today, with what happened October 7th and how that's made my slippery slope go from like this to fighting anti-Semitism, it's sad how mankind finds more and more ways to torture each other and to punish each other and murder and steal and whatever. You know, it's sad that we don't learn from history, that we can't just become, you know, that we can't be combined as a unified people. It's going to get us in trouble someday. That day's coming, but I'm not crazy about all these protests now. A lot of us people that are ignorant about history. Some people have been fervently educated in their own religion, whether jihadists. I mean, those are an exception, thank God. But hopefully that's not growing too quickly. But it scares me seeing kids in colleges, for example, where I want the book to be taught, for example, seeing these people protest. They're denying the Holocaust. They're denying 911. Some of them weren't even born in 911. I love to remind people 911 was American targets, not Jewish targets, not Christian, not Muslim targets. It was a lot of people died on those attacks.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt, because there's one thing I always ask all my authors, and that's, what was the trigger? Because writing a book, even though a lot of it was already done, it's still a big deal and a big commitment. What was the trigger you said, okay, I'm going to write this and I'm going to publish it? How did that happen?
It's just self-motivating. When I plugged in the disc and I started reading the stories, I said, oh my God, this cannot be a story that's left in my computer, in my office.
Cannot be lost.
Needs to be shared. It can't be correct. And, people call this corny, maybe not, but the disc kind of called out to me like Superman's kryptonite. When I started working, my friend, it just kind of worked in itself into place. And it was self-motivating. I mean, it was heartwarming. And I literally was doing 1 or 2 pages, maybe a day or a week, to accelerating to 5, 10, 15 pages a week, maybe more, because I was getting more and more into it. And then I moved down here to Florida in 2019. I just beat the COVID, but so I had to hustle up to wrap up my computer system and everything. So this is just the first version, and got that done before I moved down here in 2019. But so that helped accelerate it. But the interest just kind of grew and grew and grew. And then I did more of the history. I did my own homework on the history, as did my co-author, as did a gentleman we hired, Peter Black, from a retired guy, from a historian from the U.S. Holocaust Museum, to verify the truth of the history. So it is a history book too, as well as an adventure. And but yeah, it was self-motivating. I mean, the miracles, and the background of anti-Semitism, and you get the message early on. And little did I, first of all, if you knew me 6 years ago, you'd say this guy would never do this. Secondly, my parents wrote this as though they knew I was going to do this. And don't you hate it when your parents are right? And so, so I love to say that. And thirdly, I feel a little badly that, I didn't do all of this while they were still alive. But, you've got a family, you've got a career. I'm busy. You're just busy. And so you don't really have time to sit but I was working part-time, and it just intrigued me. And so the motivation was there. And here we go. We're carrying it forward. So yeah, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you said this guy would never do this. And when I did this, I never thought the world would be where we're at right now, that it's getting more out of control, and how salient the message is. So it's all gelling. I just hope that we reach out to a lot of people with the story, and many others like it. Amsterdam Publishers, wonderful publishing company. There's a lot of great books that are coming out of there, different stories from all over Europe and Ukraine and Russia. And there's South American authors. There's Mexican authors. There's a 102-year-old author. There's an author who's a teenager. The co-authors. It's fantastic group, and I get to meet them in New York coming up in the fall, and I'm looking forward to that too. So But yeah, we need to tell these stories, and a classroom is a start. Prisons, I suppose, especially people that do hate crimes, people that are busted for doing hate crimes, hate speeches. If they're arrested, if it's illegal, then they should be made to read some of these, to read these books and watch these documentaries and learn about hate and how horrible it is. And because you could be on the other end of the gun too, no matter what your religion, what your race.
Robert, just to wrap up, where can we find your book? You mentioned Amsterdam publishers. Where else?
Okay, well, they're the ones, they're the publishers, but so it's Not a Real Enemy. And I've got a couple of them now. So it's won 4 awards, and I don't even know what to do with that. I might have already mentioned that, but it's overwhelming, and I don't have time to, I'm not the type of guy to pat myself on the back and sit on my laurels, but it does mean that somebody professional finds that the book is important and it's good quality and the message is important. So there's that. The other announcement is I've just been recently invited to do a 2-day book signing at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. in April. And that to me is the pinnacle of what we do, what we're doing. And I'm so excited and honored and blessed. And that's another thing I've been able to absorb. And I know a lot of people in DC. It'll be great to see them and meet a lot of other great people. And hopefully I get a lot of those as well. So you can buy the book there at the U.S. Holocaust Museum and the one in Illinois, where I've already done a great book presentation. Amazon. It's available hardback, paperback, or Kindle. If you've got the Kindle Unlimited, it would be free. If you don't, or I think Amazon Prime, I don't know if there's a discount. I'm not sure about that. But if you don't, it's like $6, $6.95 for the Kindle. We're working on an audiobook. Hopefully that's out in a few months. That's a lot of work too. It's on sale at the Tufts University bookstore, my alma mater, which is a great honor. I think that's about it. As I say, Walmart, and of course Barnes & Noble, Barnes & Noble online, or if you go to Barnes & Noble store, anyone. There's one near you, Fall River. There's a Barnes & Noble that the book's on sale. So it isn't some brick and mortar, probably about 15 or 20 brick and mortars, but go into any of Barnes & Noble, ask for the book, Not a Real Enemy, and they can find it for you. They can ship it to you, or they can bring it into the store for you, or you can just get it online. I've got a website, robertjwolfmd.com, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Holocaust and the Hungarian Revolution. There's some videos, TV interviews. I've done many of those podcasts. More coming. We're real busy trying to fight anti-Semitism, and I'm real proud to say that I'm a big part of that. And I'm fighting the hate, and that's my charge now. That's I'm doing about 10-20% medicine and probably 80% book. Not a Real Enemy.
Dr. Robert Wolf, thanks for joining me on The Art of Medicine.
Dr. Wilner, it was a pleasure, and thank you. Pleasure meeting you. Thank you.
Before we close, I'd like to give another thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com, a resource where providers can get real, unbiased answers about locum tenens. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time.
This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on The Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests, and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, or other group or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com